What's up guys, James here, and welcome back to another video on the channel. Every once in a while, I like to put my channel's name into Google just to see what shows up. Last spring, I was surprised when squeezed between results of my own videos was a scholarly bibliography citing one of my older videos in a seminar written by Maria Rosas for the University of Porto's Faculty of Fine Arts. That's right, one of my videos, put together in a few hours in my bedroom, was cited in a Portuguese university report along with 35 other sources. Translated to English, the title of the article is Adrift in Ovar, Dematerialization of Liminal Spaces. This report talks about the dematerialization of art and how it can be applied to the concept of liminal spaces. It also contains many examples of liminal spaces in Ovar, a city in Portugal. Dematerialization in art is, put extremely simply, when the idea behind an art piece takes precedence over its physical form. Later in this video, I'll read over the seminar in its entirety and explain how dematerialization can be applied to liminal spaces. However, before I do this, I would like to recap the video of mine that was cited. Explaining liminal spaces was a video I put out almost exactly 4 years ago now, on February 10, 2021. At the time, liminal spaces were still kind of a niche internet topic and hadn't yet reached the peak of their popularity that they would go on to. In my video, I talk about what liminal spaces are and the feeling they give off, which I like to call uneasy nostalgia. Uneasy nostalgia is not the easiest thing to explain. I think of it as the feeling we get from seeing something we usually would be sentimental about, but which is now devoid of elements which made it charming at the time, almost leading it into the realm of eeriness. Liminal space photos show nondescript types of places we've all been to, but devoid of any people and with dim lighting and a lack of furniture, just feel kind of off. Still, this kind of leans into the feeling even more that these are places we've been to before. Let's take a photo of a classic liminal space hallway, for example. This photo is of a hallway that any of us could have been in before, and likely we have been in extremely similar rooms throughout our lives, giving us that sense of nostalgia. But because the photo is so devoid of any identifying details, we'd never know for sure. Still, this broad appeal with a cutoff at specific details makes it so both me and people I've never interacted with in my life who live extremely far away can still experience the same emotions I do. As well as this, a liminal space traditionally is a specific type of room. You see, not every eerie photo counts as a liminal space. Liminal spaces are usually ones which are symbolic of, you guessed it, liminality, another term I talk about in that original video. Liminality is the ambiguous transitory stage between two states of something. It can be seen as the transition area between a starting point and a destination. This is why liminal space photos are usually of hallways, or other areas like stairwells and parking lots. A hallway isn't a starting or ending point, but it's the transitory area between two places. When you use a hallway, you're no longer where you started, but you're also not quite at your destination yet. You're on the way there, but during that time, you're still in this gray in-between space. However, you still remember these times, and they are a part of your journey. The memories gained still go on to serve as nostalgia, which we experience when looking at these photos. My original video on liminal spaces was released over 4 years ago, so I'll say that it is pretty outdated, and my editing, research, and narration skills have all definitely improved in that time. But if you're interested, still go ahead and check it out, although I have just summarized most of it. With that out of the way, I would like to read over the article that I mentioned at the start of this video. It was originally written in Portuguese, and I can't guarantee the accuracy of this translation, so I'll link the original article in the description for anyone interested. But trust me, stay with me until the end because this seminar on liminal spaces is genuinely mind-boggling. Without further ado, I present Adrift in Ovar, the dematerialization of liminal spaces. Abstract. This written work aims to take sides on the theme urban and transurban drifts, walking as a destructive practice, within the aesthetics of liminal spaces, and expand on the practice of dematerialization explained by Jacob Lilamos in the text Conceptual Transformations of Art from Dematerialization of the Object to Immateriality in Networks from 2006, and at the same time expand and conjugate Marc Augé's term non-place from his text Introduction to an Anthropology of Supermodernity from 1992. Liminal spaces, a lost time. A brief introduction to the term liminal is necessary to understand the relevance of the dematerialization of a place within the theme of urban drifts. The word liminal comes from the Latin term limen, consisting of something characterized by uncertain properties, something obscure and imprecise, specifically in a temporary and transitory window, while something no longer has its previous status, but at the same time, the metamorphosis to the next phase has not yet occurred. The liminal event keeps the something on the axis between identities. The concept of the aesthetics of liminal spaces is well established within the context of dematerialization. It not only encompasses physical spaces such as shopping centers, waiting rooms, empty corridors, and parking lots, but also encompasses virtual spaces that are also in the limbo between stages: photographs, digital paintings, videos, 3D sculptures, etc. This aesthetic is directly related to the feeling of nostalgia, restlessness, and strangeness that manifests itself when we are confronted with something that is familiar to us outside its context, mostly places that were designed to serve people and from the outset would be conditioned to cohabit with human beings, and yet the recurring theme of this aesthetic is that they are unpopulated and hostile. The perception of the threshold is also based on the collective memory that we have in the immaterial world. Living in the era of a global village, the childhoods of the most recent generations, like the millennials and the Gen Z, are permanently cataloged in the world of networks. Sharing information is easier than ever, and with this, we see an increasing rise in interest in these images and places, physical or virtual, that generate common feelings among individuals from different countries, educations, and environments. The popularity of the use of this aesthetic on the internet as a portal to virtual worlds has been particularly noticeable in recent years. However, there is a clear distinction between a simple image of an empty hallway, stairs, or parking lot, and a real liminal space within this aesthetic. We have, as an example, the edited photo Flooded Subway Station by Reddit user SpookyGear2 in 2020, where we can see that it is not enough for the space to be uninhabited, but it is also necessary for it to be demonstrated through a less than perfect photograph or painting, using techniques such as poor photographic framing or insufficient lighting through real means or digital editing. Some liminal spaces are artificially created from digital painting. Others can be produced entirely within the virtual realm. An example is the series Dream Pools by Jared Pike in 2021, where the artist creates completely virtual pools from memories. Although it is clear that they are unrealistic and impossible places to exist, it is undeniable that the collective mind on the network recognizes the idea of the pools and also recognizes, as a consequence, the nostalgia that these unreal places bring, whether it's real or virtual nostalgia. It's actually a bit difficult to explain specifically what can be considered a liminal space, which may be considered liminal for some, may be merely frightening for others, or may not even create any emotions. For example, the painting Waiting Room for the Beyond by John Register in 1988, like Pike's series of swimming pools, creates an environment that is virtual and immaterial, but at the same time globally recognizable. In this case, the empty waiting room with a single chair creates a sense of discomfort. We do not know what we are waiting for, or for what purpose, but the intuition, the collective idea, that common knowledge of a normal waiting room exists, placing this painting firmly within the liminal spectrum. The main reason why we are fascinated by these images is because they somehow represent the failed utopias of the modern urban era, a dematerialization of human technology. A photograph of an empty forest does not generate the same feeling as an image of an empty building. Nature is incapable of creating this unusual suffocation, whether real or virtually manufactured. From these notions, we can truly perceive the loneliness and futility of human ingenuity, and at the same time, the collective memory contained within immateriality allows us, even without the distraction of individuals in the images, to be able to relate to the images and the ideas contained in them. And thanks to this, we increasingly discover the absurdity of our creations in a world without human beings, without their identity. The dematerialization of a liminal object. The term dematerialization was first introduced in John Chandler and Lucy Lippard's text, The Dematerialization of Art, published in 1968 in the magazine Art International. In this text, the two artists relate dematerialization with ultra-conceptual art that gives priority to the artist's thought process and the work, and consequently ends up resulting in the artistic objects becoming somewhat obsolete. There are two definitions of dematerialization. We have the first, literal, explained by Terry Atkinson in the text concerning the article The Dematerialization of Art from 1968. Atkinson claims that the correct definition of the word does not entirely coincide with its use within the term art, the definition given in the dictionary being removal of the material or physical qualities of something. It is argued that because all works of art, and by extension all places, are still objects in one way or another, they cannot in a literal sense be considered dematerialized. However, we can instead follow the thinking of Jacob Lilimos in his text Conceptual Transformations of Art from 2006, where Lilimos explains that it is important that by looking at the concept of dematerialization under a microscope, that is, in a rigorous and almost scientific way, we miss the opportunity to explore it as an artistic aesthetic. Although considering both definitions of dematerialization necessary, it is preferable to use dematerialization as a starting point for a dialogue or a discussion, rather than using it as a process, a result of the interpretive space surrounding artistic practice. We can then see that the concept of dematerialization has its origins in the metamorphosis of ideas, and is still in constant evolution and renewal today. It is a mixture of contents and ideologies, sometimes contradictory and vague, without a concrete consensus. As the notion is welcomed and discussed by various artists and critics, its potential develops just like the aesthetics of liminal spaces. Nowadays, the common definition is that dematerialization is part of conceptual aesthetics, where ideas and dialogue are the main elements. Specifically, the relationship between artistic matter and dematerialization will be pronounced. It is argued by Lilimos that the D in dematerialization refers to the conceptual approach to matter itself. He interprets dematerialization as an aesthetic where the conceptual is always material and vice versa. The approach allows for an open dialogue between the conceptual and material dimensions of art, by freeing matter from the object, and as a consequence of philosophical, aesthetic, and visual discussions, it is possible to understand matter as potentially predisposed to a continuous reconfiguration, reorganization, reinterpretation, and redistribution of the conceptual. Instead of materiality being confined to specific and finite forms, the conceptual places materiality in an aesthetic horizon where it is transformed into a current but never final virtuality. It is always in continuous progress. In other words, by subjecting matter to conceptual abstractionism in a mental rather than visual sense, the doors to new qualities and meanings are opened. Following the thought highlighted previously, this new arrangement of matter within what is considered conceptual is used to give special attention to the physical process of creation, the time involved, the instability of the material, and the irreversibility of the action, which comes with the artistic means of creation. We have, as an example, Robert Smithson's work Partially Buried Woodshed from 1970, where Smithson piles earth with a bulldozer and shovel onto a wooden cabin until it eventually gives way under the weight of the earth and is partially buried. We also have the architectural work of Gordon Matta Clark's Splitting from 1974. In this work, Matta Clark dissects in two an abandoned suburban house about to be demolished. He delineates and divides the house in half, and then removes part of the interior structure that supports the half on one side only, causing part of the house to stand upright and the other to lean. The works of Smithson and Matta Clark demonstrate that the object had to be destroyed in order to become a work of art, both conceptual and material. This proves that the process and performative action of the work are as important, if not more so, than the work or object itself. In conjunction with the fact that many of these works are abandoned or destroyed after the execution, they convey through their practices that thinking about matter within the conceptual is kind of an attack on the object. Adrift. The search for non-places. It is also important to recognize the influence of Marc Auger and his work Introduction to an Anthropology of Supermodernity in 1992, where Auger designates places such as bus stops, train stations, or airports as non-places. Auger argues that no matter how elaborate and grandiose they are incapable of conferring a sense of place. Unlike places, which maintain an identity with their historical significance, non-places are places intended for the transport of people without individuality, a faceless crowd. The idea of non-places, according to Auger, is that anyone can feel comfortable within them because they're all equally alienating to human beings. For example, if we travel to a place that is culturally foreign to us, the most familiar aspect of that place will be its generic non-places, which in this context are universal. Non-places can be thought of as machines whose main utility is the ability to replace and improve human interaction. For example, the ATM is more convenient than the bank, and the credit card is simpler to use than cash. The gradual importance of non-places on a global scale is an index of what Auger calls supermodernity, and the experience of them its definitive characteristic caused by the epoch of late capitalism. Taking into account all the themes discussed above, my drift aimed to search for liminal, dematerialized, or non-places. Abandoned places exposed to the elements with the clear characteristic that they were created by human beings, but which at the same time are outside the habit of human beings, are places given over to nature and at the same time are not considered nature. They have history, but at the same time have no identity. They are simply in a permanent state of dematerialization. Hey guys, it's James again, and that was the entire article. I'm curious as to what parts of my original video could have possibly served as a citation to any parts of this seminar, if there even were any. Also, I know that might have just been a lot to take in with all of these abstract concepts. I honestly found this entire article to be super interesting, looking at liminal spaces from an abstract, artistic point of view. I honestly never even thought that liminal spaces could be talked about to such great depth. To me, they were kind of just a cool internet phenomenon that was fun to look at, and that's kind of just it. Hell, I thought they just sprang up out of nowhere a few years ago, but to my surprise, this article shows that artistic phenomenons similar to liminal spaces have existed and been the topic of discussion for decades. And of course, this article draws parallels between modern liminal space photos and the topic of the dematerialization of art, which dates back to the 1960s. This definitely pushes the boundaries of liminal space discussion. I would like to state that most of the credit in this video does go to Maria Rosas for writing an entire report which I simply narrated, as well as each person listed in the bibliography. I didn't know if the topic of liminal spaces would ever resurface on my channel after my latest Backrooms video, but I guess we just never know for sure where the future takes us. 2025 is starting off pretty good, and I have high hopes for some of the videos I plan on releasing this year. I'd like to thank everyone who stuck around this far. My channel is almost at 6,000 subscribers, and I'd like to hit that milestone soon. If you made it this far and aren't already subscribed, it would be very appreciated. Happy Valentine's Day. I hope you all have a great rest of your Februaries. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.